Energy Forum to present you a pre-presentation of our flagship publication, the Southeast Europe Energy Outlook 2025-2026. The official presentation will take place in a week's time, so this is an advanced presentation, and I'm very happy that I'm making this contribution to the Athens Energy Forum. This is a major study which is conducted by our institute every 3 years or 4 years, depending on the circumstances. The first one was conducted in 2011, and then 2017, 2022, so this is the 4th time that we publish this information. This is a major undertaking by the Institute. We have contributions from 27 different contributors, authors, who cover all different countries in the region and all different sectors, all different areas of the energy sector. So we have economic information, then we go to environmental policies, regional issues, country profiles. We have country profiles for all 16 core countries of the region. You'll see them in a minute. Then, obviously, energy security is topping now the list of priorities, energy demand and supply projections for the various groups of countries. And then we go to the different areas of the energy nexus, which is hydrocarbon exploration, the oil sector, natural gas, electricity sector, renewables, nuclear power, energy efficiency, and technologies, hydrogen, CCUS, and we end with projections of the investment outlook in the various countries. So we approach the issue of energy in a regional context, and we do this because since the foundation of the Institute back in 2003, we have developed a network of partners with whom we work together all the time, especially when it comes to such major studies where we ask them to contribute. And between them, we have various workshops, roundtables, conferences, and so forth. So why a regional approach? To understand the geopolitical and geographic sphere within which we operate, it is important to define and evaluate the region. So to study, analyze, and understand the region's energy market structure and associated energy flows, we need that regional approach. We live in a period where we see a lot of convergence of the different types of activity from industry, economy, services, and so forth. So there's more and more interconnection and interflows of energy and money flows between the different countries. So that's why a regional approach, we think, works, because then we acquire a much better idea of the actual situation and the challenges which lie ahead. So the blue part are the core countries, which we track as an institute, both statistically and analysis-wise. And the green ones are what we call the peripheral countries. And these are the countries with whom we have exchanges of energy and investment, and of course a lot of interest with regard to analysis, energy security issues, which we share with many countries. Why this study? Because we need a critical assessment of the current energy status. We need to have comprehensive data, and we need to analyze the dynamics of regional integration process, because what is important to understand in the region is that we are experiencing a regional integration process in more ways than one. And of course, to understand the energy demand, supply, demand, consumption, and energy mix in the region. The economies of the region are not uniform, but they're not that divergent. And what we see here, the GDP development over the last few years, we see a convergence. Of course, we have different plateaus of economic activity. Some countries are higher GDP than others, but what we see here is that over the last few years, we have a convergence, or we have, let's say, a linear development, not much growth. Some countries have more growth than others have the same. EU countries, for example, are following the EU average. Turkey, on the other hand, is experiencing a very high growth rates over the last few years, despite various economic problems, and so forth. So that's very important to understand. Of course, there's a lot of analysis behind that, but it's important to have a picture where, yes, we have not that divergent economies, and this allows us to make the comparisons and establish some framework. Now, the energy mix is important. The energy mix of the 16 core countries. And we split that with Turkey and without Turkey. Because Turkey, if we put Turkey and all the other countries in the region, Turkey represents approximately 50% of demand, consumption, investment, whatever you have. So if we take Turkey out, as you'll see in a minute, there is a different picture. But we need to study both cases, because that's the only way to be able to understand what's happening. So with Turkey, we see here 2023, 10 years apart. And what we see that solid fuels, which is the blue one, has a small reduction. Gas has a small reduction as well. And then we have oil, which we see an increase. Despite all the efforts to try to take hydrocarbons out of the equation, we see here an increase, 4%. I mean, 4% is very big when we see the size of the economy. And we see a growth in renewables from 30% to 18%, which is expected given the tremendous investment that has taken place over the last few years. And of course, we have nuclear from 5% to 4%. Now, if we switch the situation without Turkey, what do we see? We see a much more definite decrease in terms of solid fuels from 25% to 16%. And this is understandable because several countries, I mean, more than 2/3 of the economy of Southeast Europe are EU countries. So with EU following a decarbonization path, we see a sharp reduction in terms of solid fuels. Gas use is more or less the same, but again, when we come to oil, we see an increase, a huge increase, from 31% to 37%. Why? We have more cars, we have more mileage, and we have higher GDP than we had a few years ago. And of course, we see an increase when it comes to renewables, but nothing spectacular, as you see here. So this gives us an idea. The countries in the region share one thing, that they are, all of them, or most of them, oil import dependent. So oil and gas, as you'll see in a minute, are coming into the region from outside. So it makes the countries very, very dependent. And here we see the same situation with gas. So oil and gas dependency, that is hydrocarbon dependency, is one of the features of the energy economy of the region. And solid fuels dependency in Southeast Europe is especially high because despite all the decarbonization efforts, we have countries like Serbia, like North Macedonia, even Croatia, that are very high dependent. Are the countries reaching the goals of EU as far as decarbonization is concerned? Yes and no. Some countries, for example, Greece, are more advanced than others, but on the whole, the countries lag behind EU goals. And this is understandable in the sense that you cannot take the hydrocarbon out of the equation so fast because of the investment that has taken place all the previous years, because of the supply chains, which are very efficient compared to others. So decarbonization is a goal. Many countries in the region work towards this. As you'll see, they have introduced renewables. Now they're introducing new types of technology like CCUS, hydrogen, but it cannot take place from one day to the other. And I share the views of a previous panel where they said, look, energy transition is not something that will happen in 1 to 2 years, but more in terms of decades. And we see this very clearly in our region. What are the key regional energy issues? Of course, decarbonization is one, but we have to see this in detail. Then we see what's happening in each individual country. For example, Kosovo is very independent on solid fuels because of high consumption of lignite. The same happens with North Macedonia and Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we have an issue here. And these countries are not likely to move from one day to the other into renewables, although they have started on the path to renewables. Now, when it comes to power generation, the situation is very different when it comes to renewables. And we see here that from 29% in the power generation mix 10 years ago, now we're 42%. But this affects electricity, and electricity is still a relatively small part of the total energy mix. Again, we have solid fuels from 34% to 30%. Yes, a reduction, but not a huge reduction, because some countries have moved out of lignite and coal, like Greece, but others are there and are not going to move very fast. So overall, the reduction is small. And then when you go to natural gas, we have from 26 to 18% because of renewables. Renewables have taken a slice out of natural gas. And then you have nuclear from 9% to 8%, again, because of renewables, they have taken a slice out of nuclear. And without Turkey, we see here what's happening is the reduction in solid fuels, it's much more pronounced, from 41% to 29%. In the previous case, it was not with Turkey, because Turkey is a big consumer of solid fuels. And quite rightly so, if you see the energy mix, they need this before they can move faster into cleaner types of energy. So as far as renewables are concerned, from 28%, that was in 2013, now 42%. It's a big, big jump. So the area of Southeast Europe, when it comes to decarbonization, on the one hand, it's a mixed picture. On the one hand, we have countries who are not moving that forward, and other times we have countries like Greece, Romania, Bulgaria now, that they're moving very fast towards renewables, trying to introduce clean energy into their systems. And we see here how renewables have built up over the last few years in the various countries. Turkey, of course, has the biggest slice. Then we have Greece, Romania, and so forth. So, and this has happened over the last, I would say, 10 years. So you see 2016 to 2024, which 2025 is even higher. This is where all the action has taken place in the transformation of the power generation system from a very stable, solid fuel orientated to a more flexible with lots of renewables and more flexibility into the system. Again, we see here in terms of power generation. And then we come to the key regional energy issues, and energy security is, of course, a major issue in the countries concerned. We have seen what happened in 2022 and afterwards, where we had a big impact as a result of the war in Ukraine and following Russia's invasion into Ukraine. And then we had a response at various levels by the EU and the countries themselves. We have emergency and solidarity mechanisms introduced. We moved towards more balanced energy mix. Now we're diversifying away from Russian gas, with LNG coming into the picture. So a lot of things have happened following 2022. But still, the region is very energy import dependent, as you'll see here, the energy dependence in Southeast Europe. Some countries are far more dependent than others. For example, we have island economies like Cyprus, totally dependent. Greece is very highly dependent. Turkey, although a very big energy producer and consumer, has managed to become less dependent over the last few years. And this takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of coordinated efforts by government and industry and consumers. Energy security in Southeast Europe, we have security issues in transportation of oil and gas, smooth supply of electricity, effective protection of energy infrastructure. With cyber attacks becoming more frequent, the effective protection of energy infrastructure is becoming a key issue. And we have various vulnerable key infrastructure locations in Southeast Europe where we have potential energy security hotspots, as we'll see in a minute. This is important to realize that the gas corridor, which started in the planning stage at EU level back at the end of 1990s, it was gradually built over the last 20, 25 years. And the objective at that time was to diversify the gas coming into Southeast Europe and Europe proper, with new suppliers coming from the east, namely from Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan has played a very key role in the diversification of the gas consumption and gas needs in the area. So we had a major pipeline starting from Azerbaijan, South Caucasus pipeline, TANAP, this is the backbone of the South Corridor, and then we have TAP, which is another pipeline which was built across northern Greece, through Albania, underwater, down to Italy. This project is one of the most ambitious projects that was built because it required a lot of coordination with many countries. But here we see the foundations of the diversification of the energy economy, because we have now new sources of gas coming in. We have LNG terminals, and the production of gasification comes in and locks into the South Corridor. So the South Corridor is not just a very big pipeline coming from Azerbaijan across Turkey to Europe, but it forms the backbone of a much bigger energy corridor, which we see here. Lately, we have the vertical corridor, we have the Balkan Stream coming through Turkey, going up to Serbia and Bulgaria, Serbia, and then to Hungary, and so forth. And talking about security issues, we have to realize that we have two areas of security concerns. One is the geography-related ones, and then we have the market-related ones. And geography-related ones are linked to specific geographic areas like the Suez Canal, like the Dardanelles, like South Peloponnese Sea Passage, where we have oil and gas going through, and of course any geopolitical anomalies could reflect into the smooth transportation through these routes. But we also have market-related security concerns because of the way that the electricity market has evolved. It works on the target model, European target model, and the target model not always produces the right results from the consumer's point of view. So we have high volatility of prices, and this could reflect into impacting inflation and all that, as we have all seen over the last 2-3 years. So trying to rationalize the operation of the market is a constant goal for EU and the countries concerned. And of equal concern are the problems faced in gas markets in Southeast Europe, where the EU market regulation and conflicting import policies are preventing smooth cross-border gas transit. And we have a very recent example, which is the vertical corridor, which cannot yet operate smoothly. As I said, Azerbaijan has played a very key role in differentiating the gas markets and consequently the energy market in Southeast Europe and Europe proper. And therefore, how gas supply will come in Europe from Azerbaijan is very important because we have to ensure long-term agreements. And this is something we have a problem with EU policy, which are not accept long-term gas agreements because of other conflicting goals, which is to move gas out of the picture by 2040 and so forth. So we have an issue here. But gas coming from Azerbaijan has no problems at all. Azerbaijan is now developing more capacity, and gradually from about 10 to 12 BCM we have every year, this will gradually rise to 25 BCM, which is absolutely necessary. And of course, Kazakhstan is also participating in the supply of the region because of its tremendous oil production and exports. Electricity interconnections are vital, and new major projects like the sea interconnector, Great Sea Interconnector between Greece and Cyprus and between Greece and Egypt are two upcoming projects of great importance which will help diversify. And then we have a huge project under development by IPTO. IPTO is the Independent Power Transmission Operator, which foresees something like 9 gigawatts of electricity going from Greece north through Slovenia, Austria to Germany, so it can take advantage of increased exports of green electricity. Nuclear also is becoming very important and very necessary because as renewables expand, we need more base load. So it has to place. And we have the energy demand and supply projections. I won't go through that because they're telling me I have to finish because the next panel is coming on. But it's important to realize that this, in order to study the gas demand, we split the region in 3 areas. That is the EU areas, the West Balkan areas, and of course Turkey, which is a case by itself, as you'll see. So the one who is West Balkan 6, then we have EU, and then Turkey, and we have different scenarios for all these demand estimates. And I'm finishing with the projection in terms of investments. The region in 2021, when we had a very clear estimate of investment, was something like 450 billion over the next 10 years. Now, this has risen to about 670 billion. So we're talking nearly about 700 billion. And if we add the various interconnectors and international projects, this goes beyond 700 billion. So the investment potential of the region is above 700 billion over the next 10 years. So we're talking about 70 billion per year for the whole region. Key messages. I won't go over this, but I would just say that natural gas is becoming increasingly important, although it covers a small part of the energy mix, a relatively small part. It's a strategic fuel, and it's a fuel for energy transition. Therefore, it's of great interest to us. And nuclear power is becoming very important because of the base load, but here we're also talking a change of technology. We're changing technology to small modular reactors. Energy efficiency is becoming more relevant because we still have energy poverty in the region. Electricity price formulation and disparities are becoming clear, and at the same time, as we have more renewables, we have great curtailments. So this is an area where a lot more attention has to be placed. Carbon capture, utilization and storage is an upcoming technology, and Greece has a lead compared with countries like Norway and Denmark in this area. And this is something of great interest because we can take advantage of the natural environment and the various geological structures of the region. I won't say more. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like I would just like to say that this study would not have been possible unless we had the backing of several companies in the region, mainly from the industry. And I'm glad to say that not only we had from Greece, but we had from Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey, who sponsored this study. So I wish to thank them from Athens Energy Forum. Thank you.